everyone, welcome to episode number 5 of SumoCast. You're listening to Laura Young and Rebecca Sweetmore. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week, organised by the Mental Health Foundation. So we're taking this opportunity to talk to some of our Sumo Digital mental health first aiders to learn exactly what mental health first aid is, how it works in practice, and why it's super important that we have mental health first aiders to support our colleagues. We're joined by Zoe Osborne.
Hi.
Sarah Longthorne.
Hey.
And Polly Ord.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your roles and where each of you are based?
I am Zoe and I am the office manager down at the Chinese Room in Brighton. So basically I get to make sure everyone has a lovely life, keep everything organised, and I felt it was quite important to be a mental health first aider in my role outside of the projects.
So I'm Polly, I'm the office manager at Newcastle Sumo, and similar to Zoe, do similar stuff. And yeah, I think it's important to have the support there. It's quite good to have a neutral person doing it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I am the narrative designer at Sumo Nottingham. So I'm kind of the odd one out here. I handle the story on all our games. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So I guess we should start at the beginning, really. It'd be great if you guys could sort of talk about what the mental health first aid programme is at Sumo, and sort of what your role is as a mental health first aider.
So yeah, we have 3 mental health first aiders at the Chinese Room, and we felt it this amazing opportunity because we also have, I think we have 3 first aiders.
Yeah.
And sort of realising that mental health first aid is equally as important as your physical health. And I think up until recently it's been quite overlooked in the workplace, and sometimes people taking time off and realising it's because of mental health rather than physical health, it feels less justified and a much more sort of taboo subject, and the way people feel like they can be judged around it. So doing the Red Umbrella training was amazing, sort of doing it with them and the other people, and doing it with people who worked at Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club who worked with in the youth academy, and it was really interesting to sort of bond with them about their issues with mental health in the workplace from a completely different perspective.
Yeah, that's really cool. So as a mental health first aider, they're not just... So they're across the entire studios, aren't they? And they're across all the different departments. So anybody can be one if they wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we've got design, art, and admin doing it. So yeah, there's no discrimination. Yeah, anyone can do it. It's a very open opportunity.
So this might be a bit of a sort of vague, wide question, but what is it that you do as a mental health first aider?
So for the way I understand it, being a mental health first aider is basically being a confidential first point of contact for anyone who is concerned about their mental health. Someone who is there to listen without judgment, and to then recommend potential next steps for that person. So I guess it's good because you are trained to look for the signs, but also to be someone who is approachable. So it's great for anyone who maybe doesn't know what to do, they're struggling and they're thinking, I don't know who to talk to. Maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to their manager. So it's someone who's kind of impartial and who, is not going to have an impact on their job at all.
Yeah.
And they can talk through that with someone. And they're not a therapist. That's the important thing. They're not a therapist. They're not a doctor. They're just the person who can listen and say, okay,
yeah,
right, let's talk this through. Like, what are your next steps to help you feel better?
I suppose that's really important for people, knowing that there isn't sort of a, for want of a better word, like official person to go and talk to, like HR, for example.
Yeah.
I suppose people find it a lot easier to open up to you.
Exactly, yeah. They don't feel like, their job is potentially at risk. They don't feel like, okay, that, I'm not going to deal with a manager who, potentially they might be worried that their manager might not understand. So they know that talking to someone who is going to understand, who isn't going to, potentially, impact their career.
Yeah. From my point of view, it's a super reassuring thing.
It's just great to have more people, I guess, talking about mental health in general and kind of removing the stigma that's there, as well, like educating people that might not necessarily have experienced any issues with their mental health or know anyone that does. It kind of opens that up a bit more to more people.
Yeah, it's such a scary first step as well, isn't it, when you know that you need to talk to somebody, but you don't know how. Like, I've had experiences in the past where I've really wanted to reach out, but often felt like either I couldn't or I was just wasting people's time. So I think this is a really good thing for people to have access to.
I think it's important that it doesn't necessarily need to wait until it gets to the, mental health serious talk point. If anyone's got anything that's just going over their mind a bit, it's perfectly normal and okay to go and talk to someone about it, even if it doesn't feel like it's got to the mental health point yet, because anything that can prevent as well is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've mentioned that you all had to have training to become a mental health first aider. What was that process like, and what did it involve?
So we had 2 days camped out in a hotel.
Oh wow!
Where we had 2 different course leaders who were both fantastic, and they showed us some sort of video clips, and we went through some workbooks covering a bunch of different issues, and partially it was like about covering different mental health conditions, but also just more generally things that can affect mental health on a day-to-day life and just general health, mental health well-being, even when when it's not at that stage. Learning for us how to identify it and how to talk about it, but also just learning more about it. And then the 2 days ended with an exam.
Oh wow!
Oh, that was horrible.
Yeah, it was.
So does that mean the process was the same for all of you then?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think so. We had one woman, and we were in a hotel, but we didn't get to camp out there because we could walk there.
Oh no, we weren't actually camped out. That was me elaborating as the storyteller.
But yeah, I think, like I said before, we were with another company, sort of doing it with them. So there's always that sort of being back in the classroom with strangers. But that's also really good. I think that's a really good way to train, because you get to experience other people, and you have to do role plays involved in it.
Yeah.
I know, there's role plays. So one of the big things about the training is active listening. It's like the most powerful tool you can have. It's not having the answers, because we're not trained to have answers, and sort of in the sort of therapist mode. So there's a lot of active listening, and actually training and doing that with a stranger is quite powerful. It's quite a powerful experience to do that with.
Did you find it a bit daunting at first?
I didn't, but I think that comes from my previous career industry, so I'm kind of up for that. But I know some people found it quite difficult, and there is always maybe a tendency to get a bit giggly and sort of do stuff with them. I think the most interesting role play we did was trying to explain how people have so much going on in their head and trying to vocalize it, and we had to make a trumpet out of a piece of paper.
Oh yeah.
And talk into someone's ear whilst they were trying to have a conversation with a pretend mental health first aider. And that natural game, this is what it's like for some people when they're trying to vocalize maybe for the first time, and you're just talking gibberish into this stranger's ear, and they're trying to sort of say, I think I might, and they're like, oh my god, it's a really clever, they're really clever with the way they've built the courses. But yeah, sort of it throws you in the deep end. But I think you need it.
Yeah, I suppose you do, really. So as part of the training, obviously, I assume they didn't prepare you for being a mental health first aider during a global pandemic.
They did not.
So, no. So how have you had to adapt your processes, I guess? How do you make sure that you're checking in with people, or making sure that people know that they can still reach you?
I think it's quite hard because you want to be present, but you don't want to be forceful.
Yeah.
I think that's quite a big thing. I think the internet and social media are a wonderful place, but obviously in the pandemic, there's every other article is how to thrive in lockdown, how to do this, and get a 6-pack and learn a new skill,
live your best life,
or get a kitten. So I think it's not trying to shove it down people's faces that you might be struggling, because equally some people thrive. So I think you have to be very careful about a balance of just known you're present, but not sort of, are you okay, hun, type.
Yeah. DM me.
Yeah, DM me and hounding people, like, just checking, how are you? Are you okay? Are you okay? I don't think that's the best way.
I suppose it's quite difficult to take a proactive approach as a mental health first aider. Like, I guess, is the majority of your position sort of waiting for people to come to you, or are you also trained to spot sort of signs, I guess?
We're trained to spot them, but it's very difficult it's very difficult when you're remote, because a lot of the signs are, they might be things that you have to literally see. And right now, all you can rely on is maybe like the tone of what someone says. So, or like how much they're talking or something.
Or the lack of talking all of a sudden. I don't know, when people drop out a bit.
Exactly, yeah. So, yeah, for us, it's been a lot more difficult, because also some people, they might not want to talk over Teams. Also, it lacks that personal touch. I mean, there's only so, you kind of need to be doing the face-to-face thing, ideally, so you can convey emotions and things and, proper reactions. But equally, even with a webcam, it's not the same. It's really not.
No, it's not the same. I think, because I know that a lot of, outside of sort of mental health first aiding, the entire sort of therapy industry has had to turn itself into that. So I guess, if they can, maybe there's a way to make it more accessible.
I guess it's people who are reaching out to you guys as well. In a way, everyone's having to adapt. So while your approach might also have to differ, I guess the expectation of what people can kind of receive from a mental health first aider, it also kind of just naturally has to change with it. We're definitely in like a weird time, and I think a lot of things will be, well, hopefully will be different when we can actually sort of see each other and talk face to face.
I think it's been really well timed to put all the mental health first aiders in place before this happened. And I think it's just good to normalise asking how people are, but not in a hounding way, as Zoe says. It should just be normal to look out for each other.
Yeah, I guess just keep conversation going in as much of a normal way as possible, really.
Yeah, but equally, I don't want the people I work with to feel like I'm secretly spying on them to check they're okay. Just to like encourage honesty and everyone to talk about how they are doing to anyone, not necessarily mental health first aiders, just anyone they're comfortable with. Yeah, anyone. That's especially as we're not face to face. There may be people that they can communicate better with, sort of through the e-world.
Yeah,
into the ether.
I think this comes back to what we were saying earlier about, not wanting to bombard people. But I think one important thing is you don't want people to feel like they're your patient.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't want them to feel like you've got that doctor-patient thing, which obviously, like, we're not trained for that. But equally, I don't think it's nice for the other person either. Like, they want to feel like just a human being and not like you're sort of checking their symptoms or anything.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's I think that's something I've been getting used to as a mental health first aider. I think it's sort of in my past, like 10 years ago, I did do my foundation and certificate in counselling, but I have to remember that I'm not a qualified counsellor, and it is quite a hard boundary to sort of, once people do start to open up, you have to really consider and be there as a listener, and like you said, offering the next step and things. So you don't want that person to suddenly feel like you don't care, because we all care, but there is a limit. And also for our own mental health, we have to be, luckily Red Umbrella, they're amazing and they offer support to all mental health first aiders as well if they are struggling.
That's good.
So that's what's been so good about the training, is we have the backup with it.
Yeah.
But it's been quite a learning curve through the training to learn what a boundary is, without disrespecting that person who's obviously opened themselves up to come to you for help.
Yeah. So Zoe, you mentioned that you kind of have a little bit of a background in it, but for the rest of you guys, I guess all of you, is this completely new to you? Because I guess a huge skill that's needed as a mental health first aider is empathy and the ability to listen. But do you have experience in that before, or is it something that you kind of thought, this would be beneficial to my team, my colleagues, and I'm just going to give it a go?
For me, I'd say I haven't had formal experience with this in any way myself as the person doing the listening. I've gone through my own mental health stuff. So I've been through CBT, for instance. So I was drawing a lot upon how my therapists treated me. And obviously we've said, we're not therapists, but there's a lot of similar techniques. Well, I say techniques, that sounds, it's about, actively listening and, making sure that you are listening and not trying to, give advice when it's maybe not wanted, and those sorts of balances, and learning to be present with someone. So I kind of learned from the experience of being on the other side of it. But also just in general, having my own experiences meant that, I've done a lot of research into it, which I sort of took with me into the training. And I thought, oh, yeah, I already know about this actually. And, I know what that's like. So that was interesting. Yeah.
So do you think that there are things that, because obviously this isn't just a Sumo thing, whatever you guys and what all of our mental health first aiders have learned from this, they're going to take into their future lives. But what have you particularly learned? What stuck out to you? What have you learned? Are there things that you've learned that you think will be especially relevant, or that have really struck a chord with you? Or
massively so with, like Sarah was saying, empathy is one of the hardest skills to hone in it, because it's a feeling without judgment. And it's a whole different world from being taught the difference between sympathy and empathy. That you have to, our instinct when we're talking amongst people is to go, I know how you feel, I've been through something similar. And that is the hardest thing when you're training, is to not do that. Empathy is not, you can be empathetic and do that, but you suddenly realise, you go, oh, well, I lost someone in my life too, so I know what you're going through, but you don't. Because it's different for everyone, and you have to really, this active listening, and even the way to sort of handle yourself physically doing it, to the power of that, and that can calm someone down, I found quite powerful, sort of the whole empathy. It's a really hard skill to keep up.
I think I volunteered for the Samaritans as a listener volunteer for a couple of years, and that's big. Empathy's huge in that, obviously, and the training for this went into another side of it. It was slightly more advice and how to deal with things like panic attacks and things, which is all really useful. Just
don't give someone a paper bag.
Yeah.
This might be a bit of a simple question, but what is active listening?
We don't listen very much as human beings. We hear, but we don't listen. So the point when you're actively listening is to try and clear your head of your responses, what you're going to say next before that person is there. And, our nature is, we're interactive people. You hear something, you respond. Obviously, we get very involved, talk over each other, with each other. And the active listening is about taking that step back and being very quiet and it is actively listening to what that person is saying instead of hearing it and then answering it. So it can involve long pauses and a lot of quiet, but then awkward silences. I think that's, would you girls agree that was...
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, being okay with silence, basically, because you're just sensing the silence, but they're thinking, and it's just giving them the time to say whatever they want to say whenever they want to say it.
Yeah, it's all about acceptance. That person needs to feel accepted in the space they're in, that they've come here and they're accepted, and that you're genuine, that there's definite sort of genuineness that comes with this mental health first aid that we're offering, that it's not, no attitudes. You have to leave your attitudes at the door, regardless of everything, and just sort of sit quietly with them.
Extremely neutral.
Yeah, very neutral.
So I guess, a big thing about Mental Health Awareness Week in general is kind of getting more people to talk about mental health, which in some ways attitudes are changing a huge amount, which is amazing, but it's still a little bit of a taboo subject. Like you guys mentioned before, it's really important to have someone that is neutral to approach without fear of being judged by other colleagues or anything, which is unfortunate, but it is it's a fact that it does still happen. But what can we do, I guess, to tackle that? What can we do to kind of overcome mental health being a taboo subject?
I think we normalise it by talking about it ourselves and setting that kind of example of saying, look, I'm fine talking about it. I'm, I'm open, and you can see other people talking about it. And I think the more we're exposed to that, the more normal it feels, and the more people feel like, okay, I could talk about that as well, and maybe that's not strange.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I guess just making it a part of maybe not daily conversation, but if you're having a bad day, being able to say, oh, I'm having a bit of a crap day today, FYI, or maybe it would be checking in on people more as well, being like, hey, it seems like you're not okay at the moment, and just keeping the channels of conversation open.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and also, looking at ways to bring kind of, I don't know if activities is like a twee word to explain it, just to invest in people's sort of mental well-being as well as sort of physical well-being in the studios and stuff. Not everyone's up for meditation, or mindfulness, but there are companies that bring puppies into your workplace for a day.
What?
Oh my God, this company, my friends had it.
Hold up.
They basically bring a litter of puppies and a big playpen with fake grass.
Oh, wow.
And you play with puppies all day. I was like, well, there's few people in the world who wouldn't love that. They would much more engage with that than sitting in a, Zen Buddhist meditation session for an hour.
Yeah.
It's finding, realising that we're all different, and sort of looking at ways we can, in small and big ways, we can sort of bring that into the workplace.
Well, I think there's such a connection between physical and mental well-being. I mean, things like diet and sunlight and exercise can really impact your mental health, and and sleep as well. And on the flip side, mental health can manifest in different ways. Like we see people with anxiety sometimes getting chronic pain and things like that.
Yeah.
And so we can't, I don't understand how we can exclude one or the other from the conversation when they are so interlinked. And for years we've treated mental health like it wasn't important, and it was all about stiff upper lip and focus on physical health, but they are one and the same.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I guess I would confess that, is there any of us here that haven't had a day off sick from work because you're mentally exhausted and strained, but phoned in with a physical excuse because saying that I feel quite anxious and depressed and I just need to turn off from the world because I can't function, doesn't sound to most people like a valid thing, whereas it really should be.
In the past, I've done that quite a bit at past jobs where, I didn't feel like they really understood, but actually, since I've joined the games industry, it's actually been a lot better. And, this job at Sumo and my last one at Fusebox, both times I felt like I could say to my manager, I'm feeling really anxious today. My output's not great. And I've been able to trust that they aren't going to judge me for that. I'm not going to get fired. Nothing's bad is going to happen. So I felt comfortable doing that. And the response has been really positive. And they've said, take some time, it's fine. And that's benefited me in the long run as well.
See, that's really good to hear, because obviously there'll be people within this company that might not realise that we are lucky enough to work in a very understanding, forward-thinking with mental health thing, that they might go, oh, actually, then what I'm feeling is valid and I don't need to hide from it, and I can approach my sort of line managers, whatever. And so well done for saying that. That's really good.
It all depends on who your manager is. Everywhere you go,
yes, of course.
It depends on who your manager is. But that's why I think for Nottingham especially, we've been saying that our number one initiative is that, once lockdown's over, we really want the managers at Sumo Nottingham to get the same mental health training, even if it's not with a qualification. We want them to have the same training so that they, if anyone doesn't understand, then they do, and they're able to better support their employees.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah,
I think that's huge as well, because the managers talk to more people than anyone else, so they know their team better. So that even though, as office manager, I'm not as involved in all the meetings, so it's not as easy to spot what's going on or differences in people.
Or especially in lockdown as well, because I'd say that's the one thing in our studio is I do have the luxury of literally being able to see everyone we work with, even if I'm sort of walking up and down the studio or chatting to someone else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm quite lucky sort of to make myself known to everyone.
Yeah. So we're in lockdown at the moment and it's making things a little bit difficult. But as we kind of said at the very start of the call, I think before we were recording, for some of us, we're actually kind of enjoying working from home. What are you guys doing that's working for you at the moment? Have you picked up a new hobby, or even better, have you just accepted that you're just going to be and you're just going to make the most of being in the house?
I think I would differently say that I'm not as suited to working from home as I thought I would be. I thought it was going to be amazing. But
yeah,
for me, it channels my inner sloth that just gives in to the... It's really, I think I'm at 70% DNA sloth and I need to keep it in check. So although there is...
Ancestry.co.uk.
Yeah, and I do feel that I'm not exercising enough, I'm not walking enough, and obviously with lockdown there have been sort of restraints. And then I have realised I haven't left the house for 4 days, and that's not good to do that kind of thing. But I feel very grateful in the grand scheme of everything that's going on that I am able to work from home, and I do get the sort of support and communication to be able to do that, whereas a lot of people I know are just without work and an income. So I'm not going to moan too much.
No.
And that's more to do with me dealing with my mental health issues of kind of going, sorry, do I have to go out for a half an hour walk, or can I just sit in bed and eat biscuits and then walk 10 steps to the bathroom and then 10 steps to my studio? It's a hard choice.
I'm so down with sloth. I'm like, I've a lot like you at the start. I was like, yeah, this is where I'm at, and I'm so into it because I'm just like, the biscuits are down. I'm having a great time with them.
I just can't afford to buy a whole new wardrobe the other side of this.
Well, when we were organising this podcast, I think my favourite exchange was Sarah asking if she needed to be on camera because otherwise it's going to be pyjamas.
Yeah.
I think Sumo made it really good for us to work from home, keeping everyone so connected.
Yeah.
And, just switching. We're lucky to have the ability that even if we can't see each other, we can hear each other.
Yeah. Shout out to the IT team.
Yeah, I mean, awesome.
Yeah, definitely. We were all working in Newcastle. I think we were working from home about a week before lockdown, and it just went really smoothly. And yeah, I think I was a bit worried about it. I thought the days were really going to drag on my own, but it's great. This is tremendous. I'm like, this is brilliant. Go for a run and just it's really chilled out.
Why can't I do that? I mean, I hate running, but I've got weights. I've got a weight training program, and I keep just going, I'm just going to sleep instead.
Can't be.
Look, whatever's making you happy.
I know what you guys mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of felt at the beginning, like, I need to be productive, like, we're going to have all this time in the house. I could totally do something that would benefit my greater life, but I've learnt to accept that, hey-ho, like, I mean, it's not me. I like sitting out in the garden, it's fine.
Do you know what?
That's a really good thing.
It's really important. I think the one thing I think I was saying earlier is there is so much pressure to become a better person. I was like, do you know what? I'll eat my biscuits and sit in bed, and I will take that. And I haven't failed just because I haven't run 10 kilometres today or learnt this new skill. I was like, actually, I'm getting through it. And that's what I'm struggling with social media, with my own mental health and anxieties. Sort of to put it on that point, it's going, well, everyone, and then I forget that not everyone's working, so they do have the time to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And stuff. But yeah, I think the big thing in the mental health is like, just do what you're doing, and we'll come out the other side of it. And no one should be judging you. You shouldn't be judging yourself against anyone else. I mean, I know because I do it myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to be forgiving of ourselves at this time. Like, this is, to a degree, unprecedented, and no one, a few months ago saw this happening, and we've not really lived through this before, so we have to just accept that, okay, yeah, it's changing my life a little bit, and, I might come out of this like a few pounds heavier. I've put on 5 kilograms, and as someone who, has previously had an eating disorder, that's, that's quite big for me, but equally, it's a pandemic, so it's going to happen, and that's, you have to deal with it, and just, it's fine. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, and if you feel, I think we just really need to make people know it's like, just do your thing. Get the old Basement Jaxx anthem out. I think that should be the anthem for lockdown. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone that might actually need a little bit of extra support during lockdown? Maybe they're not super comfortable with approaching a mental health first aider. Maybe it's something that they could just kind of do themselves.
I think, just be comfortable talk to anyone that you feel comfortable talking to. It doesn't have to be, as you say, mental health first aider, or write it down or anything like that, just to get all your thoughts out your head.
Obviously, Mind Charity have, a great sort of support on the internet. If people who like reading and stuff about that, there are so many articles on how to sort of adapt to this change, and if you're struggling and what you can do. And equally, from what I've learned as well, is we've got these big charities, but you can also look locally, because there are some amazing localized mental health charities and institutions and stuff where you can still reach out to people if you sort of need to go that way.
I think I would agree with what we were saying earlier with I think you need to be reaching out to people, whether it's your friends or otherwise, whether it's us. It's important to keep that social contact going and not use this as an opportunity to sort of burrow away into yourself. But equally, something that works really well for me, I find, is writing. And I know I'm biased as a writer, but there's something called self-authoring. I think I just mixed up my THs and my Fs there. Self-authoring, which is basically writing down. It's like therapy, but writing on your own. And it can be a really good way of working out your feelings. And so, yeah, if you want to talk about what you're going through, but you don't feel like it's quite the right step yet to talk to someone else, you don't feel you're ready, then write it down, write everything down, and it can really help.
Yeah, I think definitely sort of my previous, having had sort of therapy myself over the years, it's a very old school trick. Write to yourself a letter before you go to bed, because those thoughts that keep you awake can be quite often calmed down. Yeah. If you sort of sit and go, right, this is what's on my mind, I don't know what to do. Like you said, self-author it, but apparently before bed can be an ideal place. Or first thing in the morning, get it all off your chest, and then...
I'll add something to that. There's a website that I use called Future Me, and you write letters to yourself that arrive in the future. And I find it really useful when I'm anxious to write a letter to my future self, basically being like, I'm trusting that everything that I'm worried about now, like this is all the stuff I'm worried about, and I'm trusting you that you know how it turned out, and that if you were here, you would tell me that it's all going to be okay and not to worry, because you know how everything played out.
That's really lovely.
And I often find that actually it really helps me. It makes me feel like, okay, there's someone out there in the future in, wibbly wobbly timey wimey who knows this and is saying, chill, it's fine. And, once I've been doing this for 10 years. And once I started receiving these emails from myself, I started realizing that actually most of the time when I was reading them, I was reading about all my old problems and saying, that's fine now. Like, that's not an issue anymore. You got through that. And, this actually turned out okay. And so now when I'm writing them, I think about how I feel when I'm reading them. And I'm like, yeah, this is probably going to be okay. It sucks right now, but I can get through this because I did before. And it's really nice. I say physical, it's in the cloud, but it's a concrete anchor that draws you back to remembering that there is another time when this will be fine.
That's a great idea.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I've learnt a lot from you ladies today. Thank you very much. It's been really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely think with writing as well, sometimes you don't know what's on your mind until you, and talking as well actually, you don't know what's on your mind until you start like putting the words together and kind of exploring how you're feeling and why you're feeling that way. I guess it's an outlet to kind of put your internal monologue out into the world a little bit.
Yeah, there's a book that, it's quite old, so it's called The Artist's Way, and that is a very big thing about getting up every day and writing to yourself. And you can read your entire sort of journaling back through it. And it's supposed to help clear your sort of creative blocks and stuff, but you don't have to be creative as such a wide umbrella word. But sometimes I quite like to dip into that. But but then you have occasional mornings where you don't want to, but I found that those are the most sort of fruitful, when you feel like you've almost had to force yourself to do it.
Push through the block.
Yeah, it is breaking and clearing the blocks to yourself, I think, is the biggest. And we all have a different way to do that. That's what, there's no right or wrong way at the moment to deal with it. I like the idea of writing a letter to my future self.
We'll link to that in the podcast description, as well as everything else that you guys have referenced as well for anybody listening that also might want to write letters to themselves in the future. Great idea. And sort of just to round off the whole episode, since it is Mental Health Awareness Week, the Mental Health Foundation have picked a theme of kindness for Mental Health Awareness Week this year. So, what does kindness mean to you? And have you got a little story to back it up? Me and Laura were talking about this before, and we were kind of struggling actually to think of something. So,
kittens. No, that's biased.
kittens.
Kindness to myself is so small acts of kindness. I think I sent everyone. I mean, personally, Sumo paid for it. Everyone a grow your own sunflower kit when we went into lockdown.
Oh,
which
that's
was
really nice. Yeah.
a little small thing that we can all do together but separately. And it's something to nurture and watch grow. Yeah, I recommend putting them by speakers because they love music. And it's actually it's been a really nice response. And everyone's, there's also a bit of competition going on. So there's a bit of things. So that was a tiny thing I did at work as a kindness thing. And I know not everyone is massively green-fingered, whereas I have just been buying a plant, I think, twice a week since we went to lockdown. I'm starting to run out of space. But I think a little bit of nature, if you haven't, I don't have a garden, so it's just a nice little sunny thing we can do for each other and kind of bonds us over the miles and distances. And brings out you in a kid. I think it's quite a fun thing. That's just a little thing I did.
That's lovely.
For me, I'd say that kindness is about, I think everyone always says treat people the way you want to be treated. I think that's backwards. It's treat people the way they want to be treated. Because sometimes you might have perceptions about like, oh, well, I like this, so they will like this. And they don't, because they have very different experiences. So it's about listening to people, and if they tell you, this is my boundary, this is how I like to be treated, then respecting that boundary. In terms of stories, when I think of kindness, I think of this time when I was at university and I was going through a really difficult time. I was quite suicidal. I was self-harming a lot. And things were really bad in my house. I had fallen out with my housemates, and they were quite rightly angry with me. But they had camped out outside my room. And I was in such a bad place that I would, climb through my window to get to other areas of the house to avoid being around them. But there was one of them who wasn't camping out, who would just come and sit in my room, and he wouldn't say anything. He would just sit with me and just be a presence there. And if I wanted to talk, then he would listen. And, the whole circumstance, like I said, my housemates had a right to be angry. And he wouldn't, he wasn't judging me. He also wouldn't let me off the hook. He would say, yeah, okay, that wasn't a great thing that you did, but also he would be understanding and he would be empathetic. He would listen to my side and he would validate my emotions about it. But mostly it was just the fact that he would just come every day and he would sit with me. And while he was there, I didn't self-harm and I would feel a lot calmer. And it was him and that act of kindness that got me through that period and meant that, I survived that year and I didn't end up dropping out of university. So when I think of kindness, I think of that.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I think the majority of humans have the greatest capacity for kindness that you just don't expect sometimes. And it comes in so many different forms, and it can really blow your mind because it can be the smallest of gestures.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because I was reading an article the other day, and the media and just largely the art community in general likes to imagine that humans are actually we're really selfish deep down, and when the world falls apart into the apocalypse, everyone's going to be out for themselves. And that's so often how we portray things with sort of, apocalypse narratives and things. And I think Lord of the Flies is one particular example where we've said, oh, when you leave a bunch of kids on an island together, they'll just kill each other. But actually, what happened is about 10 years after that was published, about 6 kids down around New Zealand area got trapped on an island for a year. And actually, it brought out incredible kindness. They cooperated fantastically and kept each other alive. And it was the complete opposite of what we saw with Lord of the Flies. So
Yeah.
while everyone thinks that humans are actually awful deep down, actually, we have the capacity to be fantastic. And I don't know why we keep telling ourselves that we're cruel, because actually we're not. Actually, especially when put into these sorts of scenarios, kind of like what we're going through now, a lot of people actually pull together.
Yeah, especially during lockdown. I think the kindness seen in this is unbelievable in communities and within the company, that everyone just looking out for each other and strangers, and everyone's doing not everyone, but a lot of people are doing as much as they can for other people, which is really nice.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I guess kind of on the lockdown theme, it's been kind of hard to socialize with people, I guess, around and nearby and stuff. The people that you would normally see if you're going to the shops at the same time, you don't see. But I've been kind of, this is only a little thing, but I've been chatting to my neighbour a lot more. And she, when the lockdown started, she lost her job, and she worked in like social care. But since, like, during lockdown, she's now got another job and she works in a care home. And we've just been having really nice conversations, maybe like every couple of weeks, just over the garden fence. And it's been really nice just to kind of show each other that kindness and give each other that extra support when I guess normally we wouldn't. Normally we'd just rush to work. But it's been really nice. A nice kind of community spirit, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
I think community spirit and the capacity for these communities sort of bringing together to try and keep some sort of relative normality together. In Brighton, it's been amazing, sort of the independent businesses still managing to get food out to people, donating it to the NHS. And, I keep seeing people standing out, dropping off care packages to their friends and neighbours and sort of waving from different floors. Yeah. I think that is something really beautiful that we've been missing. I guess when you look back to something like the VE Day celebration we were supposed to have, like the essence of that is community and street parties. So maybe not being able to have that and realising how important, I hope it stays.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it would be really sad if we all just went back to staring at our devices and, frowning instead of saying hello.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing people often say is that, sometimes it takes a calamity to really bring out the best in people. And that's kind of depressing in a way. But equally, I think I've often said to my partner, I've been sort of getting a bit existential this past year. And I've said, I don't know what would happen, if the world did go, to that word. I don't know what I would do. Like, will there be a place for writers? I don't know what I'll do without writing. Like, what if I'm having to, chop wood and hunt and stuff? And he's like, okay, calm down, first of all. But secondly, also, people, do tend to actually, it tends to inspire something good in people. Like, we've seen, back in the war, like, it actually, drove massive acts of kindness and people came together and, sometimes the stiff upper lip thing can, be a bad thing, but also sometimes we find that when we're going through those things, actually there's something that kicks in that tells us, no, we can handle this and we're just going to take it one step at a time, and we do get through it. So, yeah, I don't have to worry about the apocalypse as much as I do.
If not, I'm sure there's a YouTube video about chopping wood somewhere.
Yeah. A huge thank you to Sarah, Polly and Zoe for chatting with us today. If you want to find out more about Mental Health Awareness Week, head to mentalhealth.org.uk, and we'll also stick a link in the description of the podcast, as well as links to any of the resources we've mentioned as well. If you want to see what else Sumo have been up to, all of our folks from all of our studios have been sharing stuff with the hashtag Sumo from home. We're also still recruiting, so if you want to check that out, head to sumo-digital.com/careers. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you next time.